So, I was going through the Young People Ask book by Jehovah's Witnesses the other day, and I happened across a few interesting articles, one of which was called, Why Reject Pornography? You know this has to be interesting, just based on the title alone. Anybody who grew up Jehovah's Witness in the 90s knows what to expect here. The edition of the Young People Ask book that I read when I was a teenager told me that touching yourself would turn you gay. Didn't work on me, so let's see what they have to say in this edition. Let's get into it. Okay, so before I actually get into the book and what it has to say about porn and how terrible a person you have to be to look at it, I just want to mention something that I'll bet at least half my audience will be able to identify with. I have a problem saying certain words. They just make me cringe. One of the words I can't stand to say is the M word, the word that means touching yourself. If you go back through my library of videos, you'll notice I've only ever used it one time at most. I'm not even sure if I said it that one time. I'm coming up to 200 videos now, each video about 10 minutes long. So that means I have about 35 straight hours of content. And out of 35 straight hours of me talking, sometimes talking about really sexual subjects, I only say the M word one time. That should show my dedication to avoiding it. I think it's because I heard it from the podium when I was little, and now just hearing the word is like rubbing my face against a pineapple. Not that I know what that feels like, I'm just saying, it's abrasive. But in all seriousness, I think it's due to the prudishness Jehovah's Witnesses instilled in me when I was younger. I wasn't supposed to talk about certain things. They had lots of thought crimes in there. I wasn't supposed to talk about certain stuff either. Free speech didn't exist in the same way that it exists for normal people. Of course, some churches have similar rules, but most other churches don't have similar consequences for violating those rules. Anyways, I digress. Let's take a look at this article while I artfully avoid using the M word. Here's the first paragraph. It says, if you use the internet, expect that sooner or later you will encounter some type of pornography. You don't even have to look for it anymore, says 17-year-old Haley. It looks for you. Pornography can tempt even those who are determined to avoid it. I told myself that I wouldn't let my guard down, but I did, says Greg, 18. You can never say it won't happen to you. Look at this. This is disgusting to me. They're treating touching yourself like it's a sin, like it's a moral failing, like you should be embarrassed about it. They're acting like it's a natural disaster that just completely destroyed your life. You can never say it won't happen to you. That's the same shit I hear from people who just suffered through a hurricane or something. You say it'll never happen to you until it does. The fact that they're wording it like that is absolutely ridiculous. And it's actually the definition of propaganda, trying to evoke certain emotions, trying to plant a certain specific perspective in your head like that, to promote or publicize a specific political or religious cause or point of view. In fact, the origin of the word propaganda is pretty interesting. It means to spread or propagate, and it was actually an administrative body from the Catholic Church from 1622. It was called the Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, or just the Propaganda. I hope I pronounced that right. It meant Congregation for Propagating the Faith. Its main goal was to spread Catholicism to non-Catholic countries. Of course it originates from Catholicism. Anyways, back to the article. Here's the next paragraph. Today, pornography is easier to access than ever before, and with the advent of sexting, many teens manufacture and distribute their own pornography. You see what they're doing here, right? They're framing it like a drug. They feel like if they frame it like a drug, they can get people on board with believing that it's more dangerous. Just wait, it gets even better. And for reference, I'm honestly torn on whether or not I think one can be addicted to porn. I mean, I got a psychology degree, and I don't remember talking about whether or not pornography could be an addiction in any of my classes. I guess I would err on the side of caution and say basically anything can be an addiction, even if it's just a behavioral addiction. But in my eyes, it has to meet a few criteria before I'm willing to classify it as such. This list is from Psychology Today, and the link can be found in the description. How important has it become to your sense of self and the way you live your life? Does doing it make you feel better or more in control? Do you find yourself doing it more often and for longer periods of time than you originally planned? Do you feel anxious or uncomfortable if you can't do it, or if you just think about not doing it? Has doing it disrupted your life and your relationships? This is one of the most telling criteria, I think. How much does it interrupt your everyday life? Not the only or the most important criteria, but it's up there. And finally, do you often say to yourself you're going to do something different, but then turn around and and keep doing the same thing, or doing it even more. Here's why I think I'm having a hard time accepting that touching yourself is an addiction. It's at least in part because there's a built-in safety valve. Guys at the very least have a recharge time. They can't just keep going back to back usually. Most of the time they have to wait at least 30 minutes. There are extenuating circumstances where that number raises or lowers, and of course there are people who just don't have to recharge at all, but that's a really rare case. I can see how addiction could grab hold with people like that, but I'm honestly having a hard time accepting that touching yourself can be an addiction. Not closing the door on the idea completely, just extremely tentative. Anyways, back to the article. Next it says, the bottom line, you face a greater challenge than your parents or grandparents did when they were your age. The question is, do you have what it takes to reject pornography? I honestly think it's unhealthy to put off and avoid it for so long. It does really unhealthy things to your mind. Take it from me. I was one of those kids who absolutely insisted I was going to live in Jehovah's good graces and avoid it at all costs. It did very strange things to my mind. Very strange things. It came to the point where I'd stare at every breast-shaped thing I came across. Anything. Honeydews, lampshades, f***ing anything. It's just not healthy for your mind. You will become completely unhinged. Follow Nike's advice and just do it. Nobody's gonna know. God isn't real anyways. Okay, now they have a cute little myths and facts section. This is bound to be interesting. Here's the myth they present. Pornography won't hurt me. Whoa, 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 what? That's a myth? Okay, let's hear them out. It says, fact. Pornography does to your mind what smoking does to your lungs. It pollutes you. I honestly laughed my ass off when I was reading this while writing the script for the video. It does the same thing to your mind as cigarettes do to your lungs. That can't possibly be true, physiologically. There's no combustion or carcinogenic chemical with pornography. For one thing. Down a little further it says, some experts state that men who regularly view pornography are likely to have a callous attitude toward violence against women. I love how they say some experts, like they know they can't in good conscience say the vast majority or the scientific consensus is. I'm honestly surprised by that. They've never had a problem lying in the past. Anyways, I would love to see those studies. They don't have any references of any kind here, of course, except Bible verses, and I'll pass on those. Thanks anyways. But on that note, I just want to point out that the Bible doesn't say a word about touching yourself. Nothing. There are a number of words that exist in the languages in which the Bible was written that mean the M word, and not one of those many words were used in the Bible at any point in time. That should tell you all you need to know about how the Bible feels on the subject. Same with smoking weed, in fact, but that's a discussion for another day. Here's the next myth. Pornography can teach you about sex. And here's their fact. Pornography teaches you about greed. Oh wow, that's a pretty big logical leap. Let's find out how they arrived there. It says it reduces people to mere objects and implies that they exist solely for your selfish pleasure. Not surprisingly, one study concluded that those who habitually view pornography are less likely to experience sexual fulfillment after marriage. One study? One out of how many other studies? How many others were done on that same thing? Did they all get the same results? If they did, then why weren't the others mentioned too? If a single study claims that and no other, it means it probably wasn't peer-reviewed, if it exists at all. I still don't have any references. It might imply that people exist solely for their selfish pleasure, but that's not what it implies to me. I don't see it that way at all. Are they just making this up on the spot? As a side note, I wonder how much porn the writer of this article has looked at in his or her life. I would venture to guess a whole heck of a heap. Myth. Those who reject pornography are just prudish about sex. Fact, according to the Watchtower Society, people who reject pornography have an elevated view of sex. They see it as a gift created by God to enhance the bond between a man and a woman who are married and committed to each other. Those with that view are likely to experience greater sexual fulfillment after marriage. Then it says, the Bible is upfront about sex. For example, it tells husbands, rejoice with the wife of your youth. May you be captivated by her love constantly. Oh, I don't think that's what that verse was talking about, but we get to see the Watchtower Society's flawed reasoning at work once again. I'm not even going to try to dissect that, as fun as it would be. So they said people who reject pornography have an elevated view of sex. Jehovah's. Yeah, except they don't know how to have fun. They don't even know what fun is because they've never been exposed to it. I don't even know what to do for these people. I can tell you that I'm very sick of their repression though. I know it affected me heavily. It really damaged my view of people. I had this view of women that was so incredibly backwards for years, and I still hold some of those perspectives they gave me, even though I know they're wrong. There really isn't much I can do to change it at this point. For example, I was under the impression for my entire life that it was only supposed to be enjoyable for the man, because that was apparently never on the minds of women. They weren't interested in it, right? They only did it because they wanted to make men happy. Later on, when I got disfellowshipped and started hanging out with the right crowd, I realized how insane and outrageous that idea was. But I can still put myself in the shoes of that young Jehovah's Witness trying to understand something through the warped lens of a half-crazy organization who will go to any lengths to control people. I'm just glad I got out, no matter what it costs me, and I hope to pull as many others out with me as I possibly can. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. Check out my Patreon, my Discord, my science channel, and all social media. And check the secret link of the day. Thanks for watching, guys.